Pat, hey, congratulations on your new film that they may face the rising sun.
Thanks very much. That's
You,
how,
it's a.
what's your name?
My,
Yeah,
my name is Gig.
Gig. How are you?
No, I'm doing well, and thank you for speaking to us about this fascinating film. But let's hear it first. Is how did you come across this story? Because from my understand, this is a very famous novel in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean it was published in 2002 and it was actually brought out in America as well. And the title in America was called By the Lake. And but it was published in 2002 and did pretty well, I think, in America as well and in France. I think it struck a very strong chord in Ireland, I think. And I made a documentary on the author, John McGarhan, in 2004. We started, and it was broadcast in 2005 on Irish television. And so that's where I first kind of encountered the novel. I read it when it came out first, and then I made the documentary on the author, John. And so I kind of got to know him, and I got to know his work, I suppose, more intimately. And and I always kind of had it in the back of my mind that I thought that it would make a great film, but I didn't uh, I didn't act in it for another nearly 10 years or 8 years. And I we started the script in 2016, so it was a very long uh, process, and we weren't, it hasn't got one big kind of story or one big narrative, so it was kind of small unfolding stories. And it was kind of, it was difficult enough to get kind of funding in a way, because it's a it's a small story, and it's kind of set in 1979, 1980. But it was very well received in Ireland, and it was supposed people, the funders in Ireland, were very enthusiastic about it. But it's just maybe, you know, um, in world in the war, and the cast were mostly an Irish cast as well, and kind of not very well known outside of Ireland. So all those things make it more difficult, and make it difficult to get the funding for the film. But I mean, it was still, we got all the funding. It was completely funded from within Ireland, so we were very pleased with that as well. That it was very much a home kind of production, you know.
Well, it is certainly an Irish story, an Irish film, and everything Irish, everything about this. What is the common themes that fascinated you from this story?
Yeah, I mean, I think even though it's a very specific Irish, the characters are very specifically Irish, and everybody who's seen the film in Ireland, especially if they come from a rural location, they keep coming up to me and saying, "Oh, that's exactly like my neighbor," or "That's exactly like my uncle." Or, but I mean, I did have the same experience. I think even at festivals internationally, people, say that, "Oh, that's like country people in Sweden are the same," or even people in Santa Barbara, which I was surprised by. People were saying, "Oh, people out in the countryside are a little bit, are like that." I think, and I think the reason for that is that we all came from, kind of a common enough way of living, and a way of making, and getting on with each other. It's kind of small rural communities. If you think of Italy, Spain, you know, um, Ireland, Japan, all the agricultural communities we all came out of, really. I mean, 100 years ago, 90% of the population was making its living from agriculture. So these small communities found a way of kind of getting on with each other and living side by side. And the community, I think, was a very big and important aspect of life. And it still is in lots of places around the world. But I think in Western culture, it's kind of every technology and everything is pulling us apart from each other, and I think in terms of themes, I kind of feel, this is about getting on with your neighbor and trying to find accommodation with your neighbor, even if you don't necessarily always agree with them. That you can't be falling out with your neighbor, because sometime you might need them. Everybody needs each other. And even if you don't get on with somebody, you don't have to fall out with them over that. You can find accommodation. And I think, I mean, some of the story, I think, is about that. Really, is kind of, listening to people, listening to each other, giving people the opportunity to speak, and not always be ramming your opinions down other people's throat. You know what I mean? And I think the world can do it, could do it a little bit of that at the moment. Uh, especially in certain countries.
Yeah, quite understand. We all need to be neighborly. So
Yeah.
Pat, and during the adaptation process, we all know there's difficulties from adapting a novel to screen. Can you tell about your process and any regrets of leaving certain things out of the novel because it could not be adapted onto screen for this film?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the adaptation is a kind of is a process of coming to terms with the fact that you can't include everything. Is kind of and trying to learn to love the new work that's created. Like you want to adapt a novel because you love the novel and you want to be true to the spirit of it, and you want to be true to the writer, but you have to make it your own eventually, and you have to kind of leave certain things out because it's just. A novel. There's certain characters that we had to lose because they were almost too powerful in some ways that they would dominate a film too much,
Hmm.
um, and we had to lose a couple of characters. That was kind of it took us a while, like a long time, to kind of get used to the fact that we couldn't include everybody. But you have to kind of come to terms with it. And I think one of the most difficult things about writing this particular script was trying to kind of make sure that we didn't lose track of the seasons, of the passing time, of the small details and the small
Hmm.
things where very little is happening. You know, the world is so obsessed with narrative. I think that your everything is kind of being done to kind of make sure that nothing gets in the way of the story that's unfolding. And I think we did. If we approached the film in that way, I think it would have been we'd have ended up with something that we didn't want to make. So it was kind of making sure that all the small stuff was as important as what the story was. That the small unfolding stories as the film is going on are important, but they're not more important than the passing time.
Well,
And
that brings up an interesting point because of the small details. Because this story is fascinating because it's also the daily rituals of a rural community. So
yeah,
how did you want to approach the characters' daily rituals, like that ranges from like basket weaving to beekeeping, to all include
yeah,
that most people would find that mundane, but in this case, that's the backbone of
yeah.
life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ritual actually is always cinematic. I think that even if it's I think even if it's actually about, say, like a tennis player, let's say, it's still it's the ritual that the tennis player goes through to get into the court, the practice, the kind of the repetition. A lot of those things are the things that make cinema kind of unique in that kind of way. And and especially if it's people are working with their hands, or people are farming, and if you film it in a certain way and in nice countryside, I think those kind of rituals are very rich and textured, and I kind of find that that's maybe the cinema that I like as well aren't isn't afraid of those small details, and I think that I think it's the small details that make life kind of interesting. Really, it's not the big events in your life, that's I think it's always the small things that you kind of remember most. And I think cinema is made for ritual. I think for that scene with the funeral near the end. I think that's the scene where I kind of really felt comfortable in that kind of thing of the prayer, of the kind of the hands of the care that people were taking over the laying out the body, for instance. All of those
Mhm.
things are kind of rich, and I think if I was in any country, I think I want to find out what the rituals are, what the kind of this the kind of the way things are done in every different country, I think is kind of is always interesting. I think that's what's interesting about travel. Is you're finding out about different cultures, and you're finding out all the richnesses of those cultures.
So true, so true. And for your production, in order for this film to actually work, you have to pick the right scenic location
Yeah,
and the community. And obviously, this is filmed. in the Irish backyard. Can you tell us about the scenic location or community that you actually picked perfectly for this film? Because
Yeah.
that
It,
itself is a character of the story.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, and it took us a long time. It took us, months and months to find the right location. And I mean, it's in the west of Ireland. It's in North County Galway, and on the edge of Connemara. And it was a kind of a valley that most people and the crew actually had never been there before, and there's lots of little roads in Ireland and lots of little valleys, and this community that lived around the lake up there. I mean, it's just a lot of people had never been up there before, and it's been seen in documentaries probably, but not so much in dramas. Actually, bizarrely, I think there was a scene from Marley and Me was actually shot there as well,
Mhm.
for trivia. Um, but there was a scene in that valley that was shot there, and so it took us a long time to find it and find the kind of right geography of the lake. We needed the houses to look like they were from the late 1970s. So we couldn't. It was very difficult to find houses that were actually still looked like they were from that period. I mean, most of rural Ireland has been modernized to such an extent that all the houses have, windows that wouldn't have been there in 1979. So it took a lot of time and getting the right locations, getting the right houses. That was a huge part of the work done, and the cast as well, obviously. And the casting. I mean, I come from a documentary background, but it was a revelation of how much the casting is actually how important it is. I mean, it goes without saying in a way, but actually, you're kind of, if you don't get the right cast, you're finished from the start. I think
Well,
most makers know that.
well, then just to wrap it up, tell us about the perfect cast because you said that you wanted to use Irish actors, and a lot of them are not known out of Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's kind of I personally have a difficulty with casting people, that are well-known actors in from a different country as Irish people, because it just takes me ages to get over the fact that I have to, get a sense of lose the sense of reality about it, that this is not a kind of a small farmer from the west of Ireland. This is actually Tom Cruise playing a small farmer from the west of
Hmm.
Ireland. I mean, it ruins it for me, and nothing in particular against Tom Cruise, but I'm just saying that it just there's a distancing that goes on that I can't. As a director, I can't work with almost, and so it was kind of I kind of very much want the people who are watching the film to find it a kind of meditative experience, that they're immersed in it. So anything that takes them out of the feeling of the film, I think is something that I try to avoid. So I think in a way the cast, if they're unknown, um, in the wider world, I think it's a bonus for me. But obviously it's more difficult to get a film financed. But I think the actors in this were very authentic, and they brought a lot to it in terms of their characterization. They understood the characters and they were able to play them, and they had great kind of contribution to make in terms of what should be done when we were filming. So it was a very positive experience. If I make a film in America, obviously I'll work with Tom Cruise, but it just maybe not playing a small farmer from the west of Ireland.
Well, no director will ever say no to Tom Cruise if they have a chance. But this, Pat, thank you for very much for carrying this conversation. It's such a lovely story and a lovely movie that you created for that they may face the rising sun. So thank you very much, and
Thanks very much, Lee.
can't wait to talk to you again on your next project. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, thank you.